All right, we're ready to go. Thank you.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. This is the meeting of the Awareness Campaign Task Force of the Salem Human Rights Commission. And like we do with the full commission meetings, we do introductions popcorn style. So I will introduce myself and then pass it on. I am Kathy Ostrand-Funchen. I'm the chair of the task force and a member of the commission. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I live in South Salem. And I'll pass it to David.
Hi, my name is David Reinhold. I'm a resident of Polk County. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm on the commission and the task force. And I'll pass it to Joaquin.
Good evening. My name is Joaquin. I am a member of the commission, but not the task force, though the interest has been expressed. I live in West Salem, Ward 8. I'm happy to be here. Gretchen.
Thank you. My name is Gretchen Bennett. I'm staff to the commission and the mayor and city manager's office, and use she, her pronouns. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gretchen. So the first item on our agenda is public comments. Gretchen, do we have public comment tonight?
None received.
Okay. So on to approval of minutes. We were having a conversation about whether we have quorum to proceed. We did not approve the July minutes last month, so we have both the July and the August minutes to approve. So my question is, how does that work with the making a motion and seconding a motion if there's only two? Am I allowed to make the motion or second the motion if David makes it?
I know I'm not entirely clear. And so I think, yes, that would be appropriate to proceed with you and David. I know it's always valued when people who are at the meetings make motions. So I'm also pausing. David, I don't know that you were at the last meeting.
I was not.
Okay, so actually, as I think about that, it might be wiser to just move the minutes to the
Move it to
following
September.
meeting. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll hold the minutes over till the October meeting, which means we'll have 3 sets of minutes at that meeting to approve.
Copy.
And so the next item is the discrimination survey. This has been kind of dragging on a little bit longer than I think we would have liked it to, but it was presented at the September 12th city council meeting as I believe it was an information item only. There was not a lot of discussion about it. The Professor Marianne did sign up for public comment, and she did give a 3-minute overview of the results. If I remember correctly, she ran out of time, but one of the counselors had asked her a question that enabled her to finish her presentation. And so that was done. The website has now been updated. So the survey report that the students put together and their presentation to us, and then the 1-page summary is all on the website. And I did see an email that went out on Monday with that information. So that much has been done. Gretchen, was there more? I know we had talked about doing things like contacting the media and putting it out there in a couple other channels. And so I was hoping you could let us know what the status is of that.
Yeah, that's correct. And my understanding is that it was also shared with media outlets, although I haven't received any follow-up questions from that. I know the initial reporter that covered it in previous years is no longer on the staff of that particular publication. I also believe that it went out in a broader email that the city utilizes. Further, I published it on an app titled Basecamp on a particular thread that communicates with people who work with people who are experiencing homelessness. Mm-hmm. There's 134 people on that thread, and it includes the primary organizations and some individuals as well, like advocates or volunteers. So we also shared it on that, given the high participation rate of people who are unsheltered.
Okay, great. And the email, I'm assuming you have an email list of groups who are interested in the Human Rights Commission, and so the email went to all of those.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. And the way we built that list was, part one was all of the groups that we're aware of that engage with different various identities, community groups, cultural groups, emails from there. And then we also just have individual people who wanted to be added to that list as well. Like anytime we table, for example, there's usually a couple folks that sign up.
Okay. So that's been done. So I guess the next question is there anything else that this group feels like we need to do in relation to the survey? I know we've raised it as a discussion item a couple of times at the full commission and didn't have a lot of robust conversation about it, but we were wanting to get the results out, so now they are. So what next, I guess, if anything, is put that out there for David or Joaquin, if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, I think our job is to get it out in the public, which I think we've done.
Mhm.
And you've talked about it to the commission a couple of times about,
Yeah.
talking about the council and you've done, and that's, so at this point, I think we're done, but unless you want to do something else.
I didn't have anything in mind. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have any thoughts otherwise. What we had talked about the last couple of task force meetings, and maybe it was just the last one, there were recommendations that the students had made about getting the word out there and transparency activities and things like that. And our next agenda item gets to one of those, which is the monthly column that we had talked about a couple of meetings ago. If we get that going, that's one of the recommendations. I think that's consistent with one of the recommendations, to share more information about what the commission's doing and what our activities are. And some of the other recommendations I think are a little beyond the scope of this group. So.
Excuse me, if I may, as I will
Feel free
repeat
to participate, yes.
I will repeat as I do ad nauseum about the need to refine and clarify the survey moving forward. I think that that's an ongoing conversation, not necessarily related to the task at hand of awareness, but I think, if this group is dedicated to understanding and engaging and communicating with the public, I think there maybe space to talk about that. What are the questions that we hear people wanting answered or clarifying, which in turn speaks a little bit to what the role of the commission is moving forward for future surveys, namely around communicating recommendations. And I'm sure Gretchen has a language around how we communicate certain policy recommendations to city council. I don't know what that looks like, something other than, say, an informational session, a presentation. As important as that is, I imagine, hope for a future in which surveys, next year or the year after will produce certain recommendations that we can really advocate for as a commission to city council, and communicating those, here's what the HRC is recommending to your elected leaders or policymakers, public we've engaged with, looking at that process and then streamlining it too, I think is important and warrants our time and consideration. But that's just more of a general comment.
Well, the next part of this topic is what, preparing for next time. The survey, I think, has been done the last 3 years in April, May. And so the next question is, when do we want to do the next one? And when do we start preparing for the next one? Because I think during this annual, both preparation and afterwards, we've identified some things that we would do differently next time. And so I think that the planning process should start sooner. Part of my question is, last time, I mean, looking back at the notes, we started talking about this in January, February for a May survey, and we're already at October. Are we going to be ready to do this next spring, or is it something that we want to consider doing a little bit later? I'm feeling like it's the last how many months have just flown by, and I want to make sure that we're ready. So that would be, I guess, what do we need to start planning that in the fall? Maybe October, November meeting to start talking about what is our plan for next time.
Question for you, Kathy,
Mhm.
and everyone, would it be helpful to to invite Professor Bradshaw to a meeting to explore ideas around what approaches or changes or needs could be done at the survey construction and distribution end that help the results become more actionable? And explore with her what that would mean or look like?
I think so. I mean, Joaquin, you were not here the last time when we planned for the survey and talked to her. I think you have some good ideas and thoughts about doing it next time. So I guess I would look to you. Do you feel like that would be a helpful conversation?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I guess my question to the folks that were here for the last cycle was, what did the preparation look like? You said you started preparing in January for an April, May rollout. What did that look like?
Well, and part of it, so, each time we've done the survey, because we're working with the class at the university, so it's a different group of students, right? And so
Sure.
we want it to be, what we talked about last time is we want it to be similar enough to the previous survey that we can kind of compare results to a certain degree from year to year. But then you ask a new group of students to look at the survey and they're going to have ideas and suggestions for improvement. And so it changed a little bit. And then we had to really revolve around their course schedule. And I don't remember what it was, but I think it was April, like the preparation time was really in April because their term ended right around the same time that the survey, I believe, was finishing up. And so that was part of the timing issue.
Sure.
But no, we
Is
talked,
Western Oregon on quarters or semesters? Do you know?
I'm assuming it's quarters because it seemed like their term was really short.
And they're grad
Right.
students. And they're grad students. So
Yeah.
that's probably,
But we talked about what some of the recommendations from the previous year's students about how to do things differently. And then we talked about some of our expectations, but really we put it in the students' hands about, look at the questions, they did the planning as far as the distribution and all of that. And we provided feedback. We reviewed the questions. They came back with some suggestions about questions to remove that maybe weren't they didn't think would be as helpful, and also some questions to add while keeping the survey manageable too. We didn't want it to be, so big that people weren't going to want to respond to it.
Yeah. Survey bloat is a real issue.
Yeah.
I think the two really meaningful questions or categories of questions are, what is empirically and statistically revealing? In other words, what is a good survey question, which is actually a very challenging question, but also what are actionable questions. And so I felt like that was the domain which I felt was most lacking in this most recent round. Is, okay, you give us a landscape of what's going on, you give us a snapshot and an idea, not particularly large, right? So the numbers themselves, I think, obviously have statistical limitations. What can we extrapolate from the data isn't immediately obvious to me. But pushing that aside, I mean, I think there were obvious gaps, and I've expressed this a couple of times already, where, what do we do now? Where basic things like, where is discrimination? If you say I experienced gender discrimination, okay, where, how? You might say how often, but the lack of specificity in terms of locale and situation is pretty difficult. It complicates any policy recommendations we can make, But if we establish kind of the where and how, then we can say, look, we have a quarter of respondents said that who are women or gender minorities say they experience gender discrimination in the workplace, and it looks something like this. That's something that we can speak to and address or recommend people solutions to people. But in the absence of that kind of information, I think it's really hard to say anything coherent. That was my big criticism, I think, of the, and not to say it was bad work or anything. It's just
Right.
Makes it difficult.
No, and I find the results, the numbers that we got from this year's survey were very similar to the numbers from last year's survey. And that's kind of making me think, well, if it's gonna be very similar to what we get next year, what I feel like there's something lacking. And I think I'm agreeing with you that if we can make it a little more specific so that we have some better ideas of what we actually can do to fix the problem, other than just report out, hey, all these people say they've experienced discrimination, which is good to know, but I don't know, it doesn't give us an idea of specifically what to do to fix those problems.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, and we don't have to get into the nitty gritty of that, but like the sample size problems aren't always the problem you think they are too. For example, who responder bias is not necessarily bad, because if you have a small number of respondents, but they are the demographic you want to reach, and you're essentially encompassing a lot of the people you want to hear from, then it's not that the problem you think you're having. And so we also have to interrogate So, that kind of stuff too, when we're thinking ahead. But also, I think maybe asking questions of the commission around capacity for commissioners to go and reach their communities and distribute. Why is it, in other words, on the students themselves? So I think that was part of that. They had what, 1 or 2 days worth of standing on corners.
They went
A
out.
few papers distributed to certain locales, but I mean, that's a very, excuse me, very narrow outreach. I digress.
So it sounds like, in answer to Gretchen's question, it sounds like it would be helpful to have Marianne come and speak at one of our meetings in the fall. I don't know if it has to be the next meeting or the next couple of meetings, depending on her availability. So that we can have this conversation with her.
Yeah.
As we develop that plan for next time.
I'd be happy to reach out to Marianne. I also, by the next meeting, might have the results of the city's survey. The city periodically commissions a survey company to deliver questions and conduct a survey in the community that I believe they achieve a statistically valid sample and approach. And there was a question this year that relates in some ways to the work we're doing around inclusion and welcoming. And so we'll be able to get that question and its results back as well and bring that into the discussion too, just in case that's helpful. And we can be thinking about how that question is phrased in future years too. I'll reach out to the professor and see about a discussion for the future.
Okay, thank you. David, did you have anything more before I move on?
No, I think Joaquin made
next-
some great points. And I think
Okay.
that's what I think. Yeah, I've always had the feeling about the survey that there was something missing. We didn't have enough action. We take the survey. We don't want to change the questions from year to year because we want to keep it identical, but were the first questions the right questions to ask in the first place? And we keep targeting the same audience.
Hmm.
We go to the same sources and distributes the same exact people.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is in the recommendations too is that there are large segments of the community that are missing from the survey too. And so maybe that can be part of the plan is how to reach out more broadly. So, okay. So I think that was it as far as the survey. And Gretchen, I'm curious if you do get any sort of comments or feedback on the communications that have gone out. I'm just I'd like to know about that. Just out of curiosity, if you hear anything back.
I will let you know for
So,
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next item is a monthly column. This is something that I think Susan may have suggested a meeting or two ago. And at the last full commission meeting, I think it was discussed as an idea. And so what this group, last time we talked about coming up with what would that look like? Is, have a workflow so that there's a process in place, and then maybe come up with a list of topic ideas so that there's a plan. And if we're going to do a regular monthly column, then having those articles put together ahead of time so that it's ready to go on that monthly cycle. And from the notes I took last time, I think we had roughly talked about having a topic identified, assigning an author, whether that be from this group or from the full commission, or even, I don't think it has to be even a commissioner. I think it could be anyone as long as it's on point. Having this group review a draft and edits, and then finalize it ready by a publication date, whatever that might be. Is this something, Gretchen, that we should take back to the full commission once we have something put together? Like, should we come up with an actual, layout of here's what the workflow could be, and then get approval from the full group, or is that necessary?
It wouldn't hurt, and it would encourage additional participants. I don't know that it's absolutely necessary as long as it's staying within the zone and the realm of the work that we're doing.
Mhm.
Susan brought it up at the last meeting and noted the opportunity for other commissioners to be authors, for example.
Mhm.
But I think it would be good to bring it back. for example, maybe you would have ideas this evening about the next 2 or 3 column topics. And you could bring that forward and say, this is what we're thinking. How does that sound? Are there any authors that are interested in volunteering? That could be a really good use of the update.
So David and Joaquin, I have a few topics that I probably took from notes from last time, but like an introduction to the Human Rights Commission, the first article kind of, here's what the Human Rights Commission is, because a lot of people I think don't even realize that we exist. What to do to how to report incidents of bias, what are bias incidents and crimes, things that the Human Rights Commission is working on. And we've talked about an anti-bias education campaign. If you have any other thoughts about that. On the printer, probably. Topics or suggestions for what else might be of interest to people?
Well, I think the benefit of the work we do is that there's no shortage of topic. I think there are different kinds of things we can do. We can be talking about the work of the commission. We can be drawing attention to issues that we think are of import or relevance, whatever's happening in the community at the time. Be it a problem or it could be a positive, like promotional thing. Like we're talking even the last full meeting. Excuse me, I'm going hoarse today. I've been talking way too much. We were talking even at the last full commission meeting about the refugee work that one organization was doing. And there was an event, I'm losing my thought now. There was an event or something next month, October or November, that would be a perfect example or a candidate for something like that, drawing attention and promoting a local organization that's doing good work that's relevant to our cause, stuff like that. Or or just whatever it is. I mean, of course, maybe the downside is some issues may not. And here's where the relationship between maybe this committee and the larger commission needs to be clarified, that relationship, because I'm sure there will be times or issues where the commissioner is not in agreement on certain things. So, for example, I can think of one now. The recent young woman that was disappeared and found dead on Saturday went to my old high school in West Salem. There's circumstantial and preliminary evidence that she was drowned because she's transgender, for example, murdered. A clear topic, a clear candidate for a response, an opportunity to talk about the dangers and violence that succumbs that community. Not sure if we would all be in agreement. I hope we would be, but I don't know if that's the case. So balancing those things is important too as a commission, because we're also ostensibly representing the city. And so there's that to keep in mind too, but I digress.
No, that doesn't feel like a digression to me. If you don't mind my adding in, it's just the sort of thing that raises the kinds of questions that we could be examining. Like, there's absolute clarity, for example, that the commission, the city, this task force are on the same page that we don't want mistreatment, discrimination, any harm to come as a result of a person's gender identity. But then the article or the column could go in directions that might create questions, like speculating on the current investigation could be difficult, for example.
Well, we would never do that. I mean,
Yeah.
Never could do that.
Yeah. But should people
for a host of reasons?
Yeah. So, but you're right, though. It could, so obviously there need to be a few eyes on it. And how would we catch those sorts of things in a draft of a document, Yeah.
In the case of the incident I gave, I don't think it would be appropriate to comment on ongoing investigation, but I think the point still stands. And when it comes to, I have some experience with publishing in the editing world. where it's fast, but it's also very slow. It can be fast paced. A month is very quickly, a very, very quick timeline for folks, especially for a commission that only meets once a month, or a committee that also only meets once a month off sequence from the commission budget. I mean, this would require either all or a majority of folks meeting outside of commission times, which I would be in favor of, but probably couldn't expect of others, or authorial agency on the part of the columnist that might preclude consensus agreement or other things like that. I mean, so, it's kind of a hard line to walk. But. You're muted, Kathy. And we want to hear you so desperately.
So coming into this meeting, I was thinking that we could have like a preset list of topics, but then if something came up that needed to be addressed, that we could, intersperse those topics throughout. But that's assuming we have a monthly publication schedule. Are you thinking that there might be times when we would want to go off of that schedule? I mean, if something does happen that we need to speak to, would it, to have something that we could put out sooner, or wait for the next date on whatever date it is that our column is due to be published?
Yeah, I mean, that would be an ongoing conversation. I mean, I can see a case. I'll give you a personal example. I wrote a column in the Statesman about a bill that wasn't being passed that I thought was disenfranchising and disproportionately harming disabled students in public schools. But there's currency in the news media, right? It has to be. It won't be published if it's not current.
Right.
So, if we publish once a month, but our column comes out on the fourth week of the month, and the thing happens in the first week of the month.
Right.
If you have a routine column, the routine column is an opportunity to talk about themes, like thematic things, not immersion things. And so it would have, so there is a tension there. But I think it's not only, here's a complicating thing. It's not only right. I think it's our responsibility as a commission to comment on things of important relevance to the city, and some of those are going to be emergent, not chronic. So I don't know. I mean, that's a thing to balance and to talk about. But that boils down to who's writing it, what's the process look like, what's our relationship with whatever outlet we're working with, whether it's the Salem Reporter or the Statesman Journal or some other publication. And the editors will have opinions about that too. So.
Well, there have been incidents and events over the past couple of years that in my opinion, it would have been appropriate for the commission to have said something about it. But we just haven't been, I don't feel set up to do that. But if that's something we could maybe do, at least talk about going forward.
And we don't have press releases, is that right, Gretchen?
Well, it depends. The city certainly issues press releases, issues news releases. And we have, David brought up the flash alert system, for example, but to your points about currency, those are on news-oriented topics. So like something newsy, time-related, that could be an appropriate use of a news release in the flash alert system, the list of media outlets. Something more thematic but not time sensitive, maybe like Commission 101, or here's what a bias crime is, and what an educational piece. I got the feedback that wouldn't fit the news release flash alert system. That's maybe a different, like if someone's interested in seeing some regular copy, that's a different distribution mechanism. We can always put things up on our web page. But so you get to a good point, and you've also got to build in the role of the city in this. In addition, what is the city going to be comfortable and willing to put forward?
Right.
That was one of my questions, is what if the commission feels that something is important to comment on, does that have to go through and be approved by the powers that be at the city?
I think it depends on how squarely it's within our scope and space. We always go back to chapters 8 and 97 and use those as anchors to help us sort out that question. And we'd have to take the context of it to evaluate. So I remember when discussing this with the communications colleagues, it would be helpful to get a bit of a list of like, okay, so here are some ideas or some topics, and then we can try to think through those. Like, what is HRC? What's a bias crime? How do we support people who are experiencing that? That's all zone understood. You know, we want all people, regardless of their gender identity, to fully experience the life of the city and be safe and treated well in our zone. You know, that's clearly articulated in code and appropriate for the commission to comment on. Commenting on a current investigation? No, that's not practical. Right. So we kind of have to take it as it comes and sift out kind of what we're thinking about. Like, we advise council, and so we wouldn't be able to jump ahead of council if we don't know what council thinks about something. You know, so that's a grounding factor as well. So I appreciate the idea, the dialogue here, and the chance to try to think of, okay, so what are some examples if we imagine this topics? Like, another topic that might be natural is we have Transgender Day of Remembrance coming up. So talking a little bit, you know, and that recognizes people who've lost their lives due to anti-transgender violence. What does a piece about that event look like? To the point about the promotional piece, the Salem for Refugees, those are all, that's one category, you know, that you could imagine being able to produce and share. But would that go out on a news release? Well, the event one probably would, because there's a date certain and it's coming up, and so that can feel timely. So you might be able to hook that to a news release. So it's helpful to get together a list of topics. And these are really, I agree, Joaquin, too, that a month can go by pretty quickly. So getting really clear on what the exact steps are and how to, and do we have capacity? Are we comfortable with that? Or does the team want to begin with a couple and test that and see how it goes? Or, you know, maybe not pre-commit, but start doing a few and test the experience and see how it goes. That might be another approach.
Yeah, I think I'll just stress too that a month goes by for committee writing very quickly. So a month isn't a long time for someone to pound out a piece, but for committee writing, and there's very few examples of good writing by committee. I think the only good example maybe is the Constitution, but that's about it. But not that we're style obsessed here. Maybe I am, but I don't think it's on a reasonable timeline if it's like one person or two people writing a piece. But that would, again, that goes back to the relationship between timeliness and workflow, because that would require people to probably meet together outside of regular commission times, and it might involve not having the consent of the full commission. Who knows? Those are things that we'd have to figure out and articulate.
I'm just making notes, although I know Gretchen is too, but so if I put together some notes and kind of an outline of what I think we've talked about to send out, and then have it be maybe a discussion item for the next full commission meeting, get some input, and then come back to our next meeting and, you know, finalize the plan. I mean, here's what we're going to do. And then depending on the feedback we get, knowing what's realistic and what maybe is a little more than we can handle. Does that sound like a good next step?
It does, to me.
And your point is very well taken, Joaquin. Writing by committee, and that time goes by really fast. And if we're going to be, it's even suggesting that we take this to the full commission. I don't know how much feedback we'll get, and then we can come back and finalize, put together something that we think is going to work. And I understand doing like a kind of a test run to see how it goes, but I would I guess if we're gonna start it, I would like to see it, to see it go and not kind of peter out after a couple of months. I really think this is important to get it out there and get some momentum going, but that depends on others too, so. Okay,
I agree.
Oh,
So
go ahead.
I have a question for you, Kathy. Would you then, in terms of presenting it to the whole group, would you be inclined to suggest that it is in fact this task force that writes it? I'm just trying to think about logistics. I like, what is the best pitch for the commission as a whole? Because I can see a world in which, we're all like, oh, anyone can write it, and then no one writes it. Or someone
Right.
writes it last minute and it's not
Right.
what people want. And so I think the pitch might be, we probably should clarify what our pitch, or what rather your pitch is, Madam Chair. What the pitch is to the commission at large.
Well, what are your thoughts? I mean, that's a very good question.
Oh, I have no thoughts, Kathy.
Okay. Because if we put it out there, who wants to author these articles? I don't know how many takers we'll get. So I feel like a lot of it will come back to this group. Is not how I think it should work, but that's kind of what I think is maybe going to happen. Because you're right, and so that ends up being a few people who are doing the work and getting it out there, but it's going to happen. I think it will happen more quickly and more timely in that case.
Well, I mean, ostensibly, folks who are on this task
I don't know if it's my
force
internet
are-
connection, but things are looking very slow on my end. So
We hear you. Can you hear us?
I'm getting a notice that my internet connection is unstable. So maybe I will turn off the camera for now and see if that helps things.
Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you
Okay.
not hear me now?
I can hear you just
I
fine.
can
Okay.
hear you.
Okay, good.
Has everyone heard? Everyone heard? Okay. Well, what I was going to say was ostensibly people on this task force are the ones of the larger commission dedicated to outreach and engagement. So it would be a natural fit. And I don't think that pitch precludes, say, Hamadi being like, I want to write something this month, or whatever,
Right.
or whoever. I mean, I don't think that is mutually exclusive. But if you say, hey, we have a committee of 3 or 4 or 5 people who are really dedicated to this part of our work, that seems totally natural. That those people would be the ones writing the column.
Mhm.
Or maybe I'm misguided.
Okay.
Do you suppose the author name could change? Like, for example, one month, Susan's the author, member of Human Rights Commission, but the commission's had a chance to review. Another month, it might be a different commission member. And so authors could rotate. Do you see that as workable?
Who are
I
you
think that's what
asking?
I've been picturing, but I thought I'd say it out loud and just double check.
I also don't even know if we need to have the author. I mean, I'm thinking it's like an editorial. I mean, the
No name.
newspapers run editorials all the time, and they sign it the editorial board. This is the opinion of the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
This is the opinion
Human
of the
Rights
New York
Commission.
Times. This is
Yeah.
the opinion of the Human Rights Commission. I'm totally open if people want to make their CV longer. That's totally good. But if not, I would be comfortable with, byline being the Human Rights Commission or members of.
I agree with that. I hadn't pictured it being a specific individual whose name is attached to it. It's just on behalf of the commission as a whole.
I agree too.
And
Great.
that way, if I misspell something and it gets past the editors, then it won't come back to me.
Well, and it's okay if we have different authors, they'll have different writing styles and a different voice, but it's still going to be from the commission. I think that's
And I
okay.
think that speaks volumes in terms of the endorsement of the commission of the work.
Mhm.
That's important too. The authority of we, the undersigned, endorse what is being said here.
Yeah.
So agreed. And then I think that does add a step in, it seems necessary to have a rotation where once the article is drafted, the column is drafted, it's sent out to the commission and they have a feedback opportunity. So, yeah,
Plus, in practice,
Okay.
I don't know how many people are going to be.
yeah. But at least there's that opportunity. Someone can read and go, wait. The way this is phrased is concerning or what have you. Yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
Okay, so Gretchen, if I put together some notes to send to the full commission before our next meeting, when would you need that by?
Let's see. I aim, but do not always achieve, to send the material out a week prior. So before October 5th would be great, if possible.
Okay. Okay, good. Anything more on that topic before we move down the agenda? Make sure, thank you. I think it'll be good. I'm excited to get something out there on a more regular basis. So unsheltered communities has been a regular agenda topic. This has actually been since the last year's survey, because we had gotten feedback about the people who experience discrimination because of their sheltered status or housing status. And we talked about doing an education campaign, kind of an outreach campaign for the unsheltered community. We got your feedback, we hear you, we see you, and also doing an education campaign for the community at large. And I think that's kind of more, that's why the item has been on our agenda every meeting for the past year. But I think doing it, like the column would be one way to do some, to work some of that in. We also have the chapter 97 changes that we were waiting to see what council did with them before we got too much further, because that would be a piece of information to communicate, is that, by the way, housing status is now a protected class. So Gretchen, I haven't seen or heard anything, updates on where council is with that.
I do have an update. There's still a little bit more to go because agendas aren't published yet for October, but the tentative agenda plan would bring this topic, the amendment to chapter 97, to city council for first reading or first review on Monday, October 10th. So that's the next council meeting that's coming up. And then for second reading or finalization on October 24th. You might remember every time there's a change to the code, it's a 2-meeting process. And so the current thinking is that that'll come in the 2 October meetings. So it might be good to imagine the questions and interests that might generate from that. And so, for example, if there's particular quotes from commission members or interest in a gathering of some kind to be able to help with Q&A and discussion, that's a natural opportunity to pair with those meetings or following those meetings.
Once council has the second reading and votes on it, and then what is the next step as far as getting it published into the, I guess, is it the Salem Revised Code? How long does that process take from when council actually approves to when it's effective?
Forgive me, I don't know the answer to that. I think it's pretty instantaneous, but
Okay.
I'll double check and I'll double
Okay.
check. It's my experience that pretty much codifies it into law effective the night of that decision.
Okay.
Unless they set out a different date.
Okay.
But I'll double check.
So then the question, and when we talked about this before, that because it's the city code that's being revised, there will be a communication process that just comes out from the city without this group having to initiate anything. But then, as Gretchen said, do we want to have some sort of involvement in that, or maybe supplement that in some way by, now that I'm saying that, were you gonna reach out to maybe some of the groups that are already out there to see if there might be opportunities to come, like the homeless, there's the homeless, I can't think of what they're called off the top of my head. There's that group that the name completely slips my mind.
Thank you, I did. And the folks that I reached out to were supportive and interested in having someone come. So Kathy, you're right.
Okay.
And what we're speaking of, you might remember there's several organizations that gather people naturally already to discuss issues and topics. It's predominantly people who work with people who are experiencing homelessness. So you get individual volunteers, advocates, representatives of particular organizations, people who conduct street outreach. And so I had reached out to several, all were interested in the subject matter and thought it would be awesome if someone could come to a meeting following and provide a little bit of information. You know, so what's changed in the code? What if a person is experiencing discrimination based upon their housing status? How should they reach out for help? What would that look like? You know, so it's an opportunity to discuss the Human Rights Commission and its role and process. So yeah, and that's now that we have the dates, I could go back and review those conversations because I learned things like, oh, we meet on the 2nd this or the 4th that of the month.
Yeah.
So I think as I think about it, my next step then is to now think about this in the context of, okay, we know the dates are likely to be October. So I need to go back and review and think, okay, what does that mean then for November invitations?
Right.
And extend those to all of you and see who might be interested. I'd be very happy to come and, you know, anchor parts of the conversation about issue. Like what would happen is I'll be likely a person who will receive a lot of those questions, you know, and so I can talk through the process that we have for how to assist a person. We could work out, you know, kind of the commission's perspective on it, what you're looking for, how you hope people will come forward and report, you know, and then I can answer process questions about how we help when someone's reporting, for example.
I think it would be helpful to find out maybe from the city attorney's perspective and from the police department perspective, what does this mean? Because I know the city attorney had some in that report that we had gotten, you know, some comments about how the commission's workload might increase because there aren't other processes out there. And so, I mean, that would be helpful for me, at least, to be able to have that information so that what we're communicating as commission members is consistent with what others in the city would be doing too, or so that we're not saying one thing and then the police saying something different if they actually come across a specific situation. I don't know if that's something that you might be able to gather.
Thank you. That's a great point. I can draft those and offer that as a part of this broader package. I think you're right.
And so the information that's being shared out there is consistent from group to group too.
Yeah. Yeah.
David or Joaquin, what are your thoughts about how that looks? If assuming the council does approve the change, what the commission's role might be in following up on that?
I think our role should be active. I mean, it's our recommendation that order.
So that's a question actually also for the city council, if they're going to have the first reading on October 10th and the second reading on October 24th. When this first came up as a recommendation, I submitted just a little written comment into the record for the council because I don't remember if that was the meeting that Angelo did comment at or if that was a different meeting, but otherwise they don't have the perspective of the Human Rights Commission. That's just another item on their agenda. Will they have a report or anything from us, Gretchen, or?
At this point, no. At this,
Yeah.
because they had the report back in January from us. So at this point, it becomes a report in from the attorney's office about, okay, as a result of that report and your direction to look at it, here are now the changes.
Okay.
So it's certainly a very good time to breathe back in on sort of the intent, the vision,
Mhm.
your hope as a community member on this. And so it's a good time again for public comment or to submit materials in. I think I could submit something as an offering for an attachment to the report. That would be one idea, and or public comment. There's a couple of vehicles.
There's not, I mean, between now and then, the commission is not going to be able to provide feedback as a commission. So I think it's on individual commissioners to provide that. I'm happy to do it. Once it comes out on the agenda, I'll take a look, and if there's anything that I think might be missing from my perspective or that might need some further explanation, I don't mind putting together some comment. But I just want to mention it if the other two of you see anything or think anything that needs to be added. You might want to take a look at the agenda when it comes out too, because this group won't meet again until after. If they do approve it on the 24th of October, we're not meeting again until the 26th, and so.
That's correct. And it'll
Yeah.
first show up, it'll publish on or about October 6th.
Okay.
And then, in time for the October 10th council meeting.
Okay. So yeah, I guess having the meeting schedule of those groups and having, something that the city attorney and or the SPD has provided input on what the law change does and doesn't mean as far as enforcement. And then we can talk about that at our next meeting on the 28th. And what we might want to add to that moving
Mhm.
forward.
Yep.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think
I
it'll
think
also be on the commission meeting agenda October
Yeah.
12th as well. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, please do. I talk way too much.
No.
I was going to say that I think it'd be really beautiful if individual commissioners, standing in for the commission were to go out in the communities and talk about. I know we've already said that, but in terms of answering your question a few minutes ago about I think the role should be very active, very interpersonal, because that's ultimately, I mean, that's how you get the word out, is you go to people and you talk to them. So.
Well, and that's part of, our role is to increase awareness, but it's one thing to hear about a meeting and to see written materials, but to actually have people come out and talk to you is a whole different, I think that's just a whole different level of meaning.
Makes it real.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. And I'm noticing that we have 5 minutes left. So, so I think we've got two big items for our next meeting. The other thing we talk about, we've been trying to send out some sort of communication on a monthly basis. I think I wonder, just kind of to myself, if our monthly column idea supplements or replaces the monthly communication we've been trying to do. Joaquin, I don't know, have you seen the communication? We have a communication plan that's got like the different events and commemorations on a monthly basis, and we've been looking at that to see, is there something we can communicate about? Like, for example, last month, Gretchen put out a piece on the Pride event that was held last weekend, but that was our August communication. And then the September communication, I think, was the survey results. So the next question is there something we want to put out in October?
No, I have not seen that document. Is it,
Okay.
Where is that document?
Gretchen would probably have to email it to you.
Joaquin, I'm sorry. I can add you to that email distribution. It goes out. We aim to have it go out monthly, and then every commissioner receives it. I'll go see if you're not getting it, what might be going on there, and add you, if that's all right.
Yeah, but please do. It's entirely possible. I don't see it. I currently have an inbox of over 30,000, but
Yeah.
and it's not an exaggeration. Unfortunately, I wish it were. But I don't think I'm on it. I would love to be.
Okay, copy that.
So the two things that are coming up in October that kind of seem like maybe good things that we want to think about is, Hispanic Heritage Month is already underway, but that carries over into October. And then we've got Indigenous Peoples Day. And I don't know if we want to.
That's on the 10th, isn't that?
Is it the 10th?
That's on the Monday.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And so is there something that we might want to put out about that? And I mean, really in the past, it's been like a paragraph. I think, I've put together something, Gretchen has, Tricarico had put together something with transgender. I'm gonna say it wrong. It was a few months ago. And so it just, just like, if there's something, if anybody wants to maybe put something together to put out there. I hadn't thought that far ahead yet. But
What information are you looking for IPD?
what we've done in the past is just kind of educational. Just what is it? Maybe people aren't familiar with it. Just keeping it factual. On this day, here's what it's called. Here's why we recognize it.
Sure. I could write something for IPD if you like. Indigenous Peoples Day. Like 100 words, like a paragraph. Is that what you're looking for?
I don't think it has to be extensive. Gretchen, do you have any?
No, I think that's lovely and would be most welcome. I was just sidetracked checking to see if any proclamations
Okay.
have happened, and there's something called White Cane Day in October, which relates to people who are blind or have visual impairments, and that's anticipated for the October 10th council meeting as well. So it's just an additional option. There's a proclamation that's moving forward on White Cane Day too.
So Gretchen, I'm sorry. This is my own ignorance. Does the city recognize IPD or do they recognize Columbus Day?
Really neither, I think. There's no day off of work or anything. I don't recall that it's on the list of holidays.
So they're ducking out.
Yeah. We
They're not.
Like I'm trying to think of the holidays we've got, and I don't think there's one recognized in October. And forgive me, I've worked at the city almost 10 years and I should know that, but certainly we're working that day, we're holding council that night. And so it might be recognized by matter of proclamation or
Right.
communication as opposed to like a day off or something.
Well, I would say if they're ducking the IPD thing, then we should definitely write something about it, just as a statement. But I will not let my government get away with not recommending that in some way, even if it's a small way, like a
Yeah.
No, it's just acknowledging that there is a day, and yeah, I mean, I think that's okay.
Actually, forgive me, I'm taking a minute to peek into the upcoming proclamation discussions, and there is something that's titled Indigenous Peoples Day. But I don't know the status, so I'll be misspeaking if I say more than that. So yeah, it looks slated for October 10th as well. Maybe as a point of beginning, I'll verify the status of this, and then I could send it, Joaquin, to you as example language. It looks like it might be queued up in a proclamation sense.
Okay. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll check the status and send you because I'm looking in the folder and I see a draft of a proclamation related to Indigenous Peoples Day. Okay.
Thank you, Joaquin. Thank you, Gretchen.
Yeah.
So it is on my clock 1 minute after 8 o'clock, and I don't want to hold people over. We have commission member position description, which is again one of those standing agenda items that we haven't had the capacity to really dig into yet. And then the last item is member remarks and announcements. If anyone has anything they wanted to say tonight, aside from what we've already talked about. Seeing that, I think it's been a really productive meeting. I'm excited about some of the things we've talked about. So yeah, so I think there's a few tasks. I'm going to write something up for the next meeting. Joaquin's going to write something up about Indigenous Peoples Day, and Gretchen will get us some more information about the Chapter 97 changes, and we'll go from there. Thank you for being here and for the discussion. I really appreciate it. Right.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank you,
night.
Kathy. Thanks, everybody.